The St. Catherine's area in Sinai, Egypt, like so many cultural heritage sites around the world, is meshed in religious, political, social, and environmental issues and current events. It involves a historic monastery church, a library and archives, as well as a museum. So, teasing apart the threads of St. Catherine's history and its current status has proven to be complex, to say the least. My presentation for you is going to focus mainly on the significance of the site in relation to its tangible cultural heritage and history, a few of the recent projects that have been undertaken to support the site and its collection's continued preservation, and the current domestic threat to its continuity. My name is Beth Reininger, and thanks for listening to my presentation on the St. Catherine's area in Mount Sinai, Egypt. The Sinai Peninsula is a 24,000 square mile wedge of arid, rugged landscape bridging the continents of Africa and Asia. The remoteness of this mountainous region has drawn religious pilgrims for thousands of years, and the overwhelming belief that this is Mount Sinai, the holy mountain where more than 3,000 years ago, according to biblical tradition, Moses encountered God in the form of the burning bush that was not consumed by its flames. And later on, this is where he receives the 10 Commandments from God, the 2 stone tablets enshrining God's law. During the early years of Christianity, extraordinarily devout Christians began settling and living in the wilderness of the Sinai Peninsula. These religious hermits practiced celibacy, poverty, and self-sufficiency so as to minimize contact with the outside world. These monks began to identify the specific mountain as the holy site of Mount Sinai, even locating what they believed to be the holy bush near the base of the mountain. In fact, in 337, after making a pilgrimage to the site herself, Empress Helena, the mother of Emperor Constantine, who was the emperor who legalized Christianity in the Roman Empire in 313, ordered a chapel to be built around the bush. Now, later on, the bush was replanted outside. Following the departure of the Romans from the area in the second half of the 4th century, the general lawlessness of the region eventually drove the monastic communities to seek help. This help was supplied by the Byzantine Emperor Justinian I in the form of architects and masons who from 527 to 565 built and fortified the monastery complex with 60-foot high granite walls to protect the monks and their chapel. These walls survive to the present day. Justinian also sent men to serve as guards. These Christians, over generations, intermarried with the indigenous Bedouin tribes, and they gradually converted to Islam and became the Jabaliya tribe that now represents most of the Bedouins in the St. Catherine area, and they are known as the guardians of St. Catherine's. Today, the Monastery of St. Catherine of God-trodden Mount Sinai, as it is officially called, is the oldest active Eastern Orthodox monastery in the world, and it maintains its original layout with other chapels, courtyards, archives, living quarters for the monks, a mosque, and a museum. The monastery is the property of the Greek Orthodox Church and belongs to the Archdiocese of Sinai. Under the hierarchical system of the Eastern Orthodox Church, it's self-governing and independent under the administration of the abbot, who has the rank of archbishop. The current archbishop has been in his position since 1961. The ownership of the remainder of the area is vested by the governorship of South Sinai, and the Egyptian Environmental Affairs Agency is the organization that's responsible for the maintenance of the environmental standards within the area, working through the St. Catherine Protectorate Administration. In 1995, the basilica and its mosaics suffered serious damage from an earthquake. In 1999, the Getty Foundation, based in Los Angeles, provided funding for a survey and conservation study to be undertaken. In 2000, the Getty Conservation Institute recommended and granted funding for an Italian conservation firm to survey and assess the mosaics. After donations from the Emir of Qatar for $500,000 and another donation of $250,000 from the Getty Foundation. With those donations, the monastery was able to cover the costs for the conservation work and the restoration work. The project was completed in 2016, but because of political unrest at the time, the opening was delayed until 2017. In 2018, the project was one of 29 cultural heritage projects worldwide recognized by the European Commission and Europa Nostra, the leading European heritage network, with the EU Prize for Cultural Heritage, the Europa Nostra Awards, which is Europe's top honor in the field of cultural heritage. Many hearts and hands throughout the ages have worked together to keep St. Catherine's Monastery open for the faithful, and in 2002 it was included on UNESCO's World Heritage List. Yet the current political and human crisis taking place in Egypt and the Sinai Peninsula in particular is threatening the future of this World Heritage Site. According to the Egyptian Human Rights Forum, in March 2021, Egypt's Ministry of Housing, Utilities, and Urban Communities published an internal document titled The Development of St. Catherine, the Site of the Grand Transfiguration on the Land of Peace. The official document included full details of a government plan to erect a megatourism hub across the World Heritage Site and the surrounding town named after the monastery. This is a heavily protected area in which any forms of construction are restricted by international regulations and treaties of heritage preservation, biodiversity, and environmental protection. Weeks after the document was issued, a few thousand construction workers were deployed along with hundreds of construction vehicles and machinery to begin a massive scale demolition and construction works, starting in the core area of the World Heritage Site around the ancient monastery of St. Catherine and spreading out into various parts of the Nature Protectorate. The sudden launch of this massive construction project was accompanied by a wave of news and media propaganda focusing on President al-Sisi's personal sponsorship of what is now officially dubbed the Grand Transfiguration Project. According to these reports, quote, President Sisi ordered that the project be integrated with other efforts to develop the city of St. Catherine and put it in the appropriate position it deserves, as well as to maximize the use of its tourism, archaeological, environmental, and religious potentials, in addition to upgrading all buildings and facilities in it. From the beginning of this project, the consequences to those living and working in the area, as well as the future implications of increased tourism to an already fragile environment, the monastery and its collections were not taken into consideration by Egyptian officials, despite their stated intentions. Because of this development project cannot be condoned by the international community, including UNESCO. Tourism is, of course, a strong force for economic development. It is, however, one of the riskiest activities to take when seeking to keep cultural identities. It's therefore critically important that the type of tourism developed is a socially sustainable tourism, which develops not only the tourism economy, but the local community as well. And this is done through surveys of the landscape, urban development, the society itself, and an analysis of threats and opportunities in the area. This current project, by contrast, is being carried out with any input from the monastic community and at the devastating expense of the local Jabalia tribe. All Bedouin houses that stood in the way of the construction have been destroyed and residents were kicked out. Egyptian officials have given verbal reassurances that people will be compensated, but no details have been given about how much they're going to be compensated, when. And this is especially difficult given the lack of written records of ownership by the traditionally nomadic Bedouin people who believe that building a house on a site is enough to stake claim as its owner. Over the past several months, hundreds of buildings have been erected in and around the historic town of St. Catherine in clear violation of the UNESCO regulations of World Heritage Sites, as well as Egypt's own domestic laws of nature protectorates. The new buildings include at least 5 hotels and, according to reports, hundreds of villas and private houses, what they say is tens of thousands of cubic meters of concrete. According to residents of St. Catherine, as well as locally and internationally recognized heritage experts, this project, which is now over 70% complete, has forever distorted the town's historic face and has caused mass scale and irreversible damage to the area. UNESCO and other international benefactors of the monastery, including the St. Catherine's Foundation, need to act now rather than stand by and observe before even more irreparable damage to this site and its people occurs. Thank you very much for listening.